Okay, so there are 3 leaked iPhone 15 features, which sound great on paper, but in reality, they all have a catch. With the first one being, of course, USB Type-C. So we all know that USB Type-C is finally coming to the iPhone 15 models. All models, by the way. This has been rumored for years and years, but now it is actually official. Remember that EU law that would force all smartphone manufacturers to adopt a USB Type-C port? Well, that law has now been officially approved, and it will be implemented starting from 2024. So this means that all smartphones, all tablets, all cameras, all consoles, all headphones, mice, keyboards, and navigation systems will need to have a USB Type-C port for charging. Now, Apple's Senior Vice President of Marketing, Greg Joswiak, he made a statement saying that they will have to comply as they have no choice but to finally adopt USB Type-C. Then Greg went on a long rant about why they don't like being forced into making this change and how this will actually create a lot of e-waste. He hasn't really given any specifics, but I'm assuming he was likely referring to iPhone users now being forced to buy new accessories that were previously using Lightning. They would need to be replaced with USB Type-C accessories now. But honestly, I find this claim to be quite ridiculous. Like, think about Lightning and how much e-waste Lightning created in the first place. Like, if Apple had switched to USB Type-C when they did on the MacBooks in 2015 with the 12-inch MacBook, we would have had USB Type-C iPhones for the past 7 years. One charger and one port for everything. No e-waste. But with Apple being literally the only smartphone manufacturer in the world to still not comply with the USB Type-C standard, they've created a lot of issues and a lot of e-waste and costs for consumers. Take a look at the AirPods Pro 2s, which just came out. They still have a Lightning port, which means that next year, when Apple introduces the USB Type-C iPhones, they will likely release something like an $80 or £80 case with a USB Type-C port for all the existing AirPods Pro users. They've done the same back in the day with wireless charging. And of course, this is a huge inconvenience. Consumers will have to pay extra, and this does create a lot of e-waste. However, pretty much everyone knows at this point that Lightning was likely kept for Apple's MFI program. Essentially, Apple gets a $4 commission for every third-party Lightning cable or Lightning accessory that gets sold. Obviously, this means big money for Apple, and they really have no other reason for them to have kept Lightning, as it is very slow and it is also proprietary, and it doesn't even work with their own devices like the iPads and the MacBooks natively. So yeah, USB Type-C is finally coming to the iPhones, likely in 2023 rather than 2024, as January 2024 will already be when this will be a requirement for smartphone manufacturers. Oh, and Apple has already done this recently with the 10th generation iPad, which has now switched from Lightning to USB Type-C, and they've also done the same with the Apple TV remote, which also switched from Lightning to USB Type-C. Of course, those two sell in much lower volumes compared to the AirPods Pro 2s, reason why the AirPods Pro 2s still use Lightning, as Apple can make more money that way compared to something like an Apple TV remote. So the switch to USB Type-C sounds great, but there is one catch, which is that USB Type-C port could actually still have some extremely slow transfer speeds. Right now, the iPhone 14 Pro's Lightning port is limited to USB 2.0 speeds, which are just 480 megabits per second compared to 5,000 to 10,000, which is usually what you get on other USB Type-C devices. And the biggest issue here is that when you're trying to transfer the new ProRAW photos from the 14 megapixel sensor, which are huge, or the even bigger ProRes video files, it's gonna take forever to transfer. Now, of course, you can use AirDrop to do that, but AirDrop is still very glitchy, and it's also significantly slower than the 5,000 to 10,000 megabits per second speeds that you would have from a normal USB Type-C connection. Now, up until just a few weeks ago, every single USB Type-C device that Apple sold had speeds of over 5 gigabits per second. The only exception being the 10th generation iPad, which, despite the fact that it has a USB Type-C port, it uses USB 2.0 speeds. And when we did a file transfer speed test, the 10th gen iPad took 11 minutes and 8 seconds compared to 3 minutes and 33 seconds on the iPad Air. So that was more than 3 times faster. So unfortunately, Apple could do the same with the iPhone 15. Just give it a USB Type-C port for the sake of complying with the EU laws. but then also give it USB 2.0 speeds, which would still cause the same issues with transfer speeds that we have now. However, what could also happen, and I do hope that this will be the case, is that we could also see a similar idea to how the iPads work right now, where the base models, so the iPhone 15s, do have USB 2.0 speeds, but then the iPhone 15 Pros, those have USB 3.0 5 gigabit per second transfer speeds. So yeah, this will pretty much solve every single issue, as the Pro models of the iPhones, only those have ProRAW and ProRes video recording. So that's not really an issue with the base models. So it does make sense for the higher end ones to get faster transfer speeds because of those features. Of course, there's also another option, which is no USB Type-C at all, and instead Apple relying fully on wireless charging, on essentially a faster MagSafe charging standard. A fun fact, the Pixel 7 Pro has the exact same wireless charging speed as cable charging. So they're both at 23 watts. Now, of course, that using wireless charging will still be slower than wire charging, even at the same wattage, as wireless charging is simply not as efficient, but it is very close nowadays, especially when you consider that Apple's MagSafe perfectly aligns the wireless charging pads from the charger to the one on the device. The second controversial feature is haptic buttons. So this is coming from a report by Ming-Chu Kuo that the volume and the power buttons, they won't actually click anymore with the iPhone 15s, but instead they will be static with haptic motors underneath. So they would work in a very similar way as to how the MacBook trackpad works or the iPhone 7, 8, SE2 and 3's home button. Now, in theory, this could be a positive move, as it will feel like a real button, but it will also make the phone more water resistant, more durable, plus you would also get 2 more haptic motors for a total of 3. The iPhone already had great haptics, so these could be the best haptics on a phone, at least in terms of the hardware. However, the catch is that it won't actually work through cases, and you can try this yourselves on a MacBook trackpad or an iPhone 7, 8, SE2 or 3's home button. It will only work when it detects your skin. It won't work through objects or clothing or anything like that, which means that all iPhone 15 cases will need to be open where the buttons are. There is a workaround though, so if you take one of these capacitive styluses, they do actually mimic the electrical conductivity of the skin, so in that case, it will actually work. So all that Apple needs to do is to have the inside of where the buttons are inside a case made out of that sort of material, and in that case, the buttons would still work through covered cases. But that's the thing, Apple could simply just keep the current volume buttons and then add those 2 extra haptic motors inside without removing any of the buttons. And it's also such a weird choice, as even when it comes to water resistance, it is already very, very good on the iPhones, 6 meters. And that's the thing, it won't even be waterproof if Apple does this, as the iPhones will still have a charging port and the earpiece, so it won't be fully water sealed. Now, maybe they've decided to make this change because of mechanical failures. Maybe the buttons are easier to break. I haven't really seen any iPhones with broken volume or power buttons, but maybe that was also a reason. I think my only concern is the mute switch. Like, what would happen with that? Is Apple going to remove it? That kind of needs to be physical, so yeah, I just hope that I don't get rid of that because it's awesome. I guess the biggest question is, how would you actually force restart an iPhone if you have no physical buttons? Yeah, I don't know, maybe you would use the mute switch and do like a very weird sequence. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you have any ideas of how that would work. The third controversial feature is when it comes to the RAM. So TrendForce has just reported that the RAM would be bumped to 8 gigabytes from the current 6. Now, that's awesome. It will improve RAM management, which at the moment is pretty bad on the iPhone compared to Android phones that have 12 gigabytes of RAM. However, the catch is that this will only happen on the Pro models. So right now, all 4 iPhone 14 models have 6 gigabytes of RAM, the same amount, but next year, only the Pros will be getting bumped. And number 4, we have the Apple A17 chip. Now, this is actually expected to be a very big upgrade, an upgrade that improves the process from 5 nanometers to 3, which would mean between a 10 to 15% performance increase, potentially even more, and up to a 30% lower power consumption. So this sounds awesome. But the catch is that only the Pro models of the iPhone will have this. And Apple will continue to keep this trend of the Pro models having the newer chips, and then the non-Pro models having the old chips from the Pro models of the last year. So iPhone 15 Pro, 3nm A17, and then iPhone 15, 5nm A16. I guess the only good news in terms of the non-Pro model is that it will at least get the dynamic islands that the Pro models introduced this year with the 14s. But yeah, I'm personally very excited for the 15 Pros and the 15 Ultra. There's so many upgrades that we're expecting. That periscope zoom lens that will finally catch up with Samsung in terms of the quality, potentially new design, battery life improvements, and so much more. Do check out our video on the iPhone 15 Ultra and let me know what do you guys think of all of these changes coming to the 2023 iPhones. I'm Daniel, this is ZONEofTECH, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.